US President Donald Trump says he plans to introduce 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminium entering the United States. His comments to reporters on board Air Force One on Sunday mark the latest escalation in his trade policy, which has already brought retaliatory tariffs from China. Mr. Trump imposed a similar steel and aluminium tax during his first term. Let's get more from Clifford Coonan from DW Business. Welcome, Cliff. These latest charges, if they happen, because he was saying that he was going to announce them, these would be separate from the levies that he announced in the first days of his presidency. So what's he hoping to achieve this time?
Well, I think we've had so much on tariffs even in the last few days, enough to fill 4 years already. It's just been incredible pace. I think with this, the tariffs on metals imports have been championed by sort of the trade unions in the US. He also campaigned on bringing manufacturing back to the United States, and I think they're coming within that sort of spirit. On the other hand, they also make goods that they use to manufacture things in the US more expensive. So I think this is very much, again, a negotiating tactic. He sees tariffs as a tool by which to gain other concessions from partners, because they're going to hit both allies like Canada and Mexico in particular, but it's going to affect imports from all over the world.
All right, so just to be clear, the last time he was talking about Canada and Mexico and others being hit with selected tariffs, he did deals with those, and those are suspended. Now he's talking about everyone, including his friends, his trading allies, getting hit with steel and aluminium levies, which would affect our daily lives. How?
Well, these things will make consumer goods more expensive. For example, they will make all of these things that we're used to getting quite cheaply will suddenly become more expensive, and particularly us.
For instance,
well, in Europe in particular, it's going to have a big impact, because obviously Europe is going to be next. At the moment, Europe enjoys quite favourable conditions when it comes to trading with the US, and I think he's going to take aim at those next. He's signalled that in the middle of this week he's going to be announcing more of these tariffs. So we're going to really see a huge impact on our daily lives.
Chinese import taxes on imported American goods came into effect today as retaliation for those first tranche of tariffs that he imposed, 10% extra. We'll take a look at how we got here and then come back to you, Cliff.
US President Donald Trump kicked off the trade war with China during his first term. Now the conflict between the world's two biggest economies is intensifying. In the standoff between Trump and the Chinese leader Xi Jinping, who will blink first? Beijing has set out to target specific American goods with retaliatory taxes, following the blanket 10% tariff introduced by Trump on all Chinese imports to the US. This came on top of existing measures, bringing the tariffs imposed up to around 30%. Trump is taking aim at Beijing's massive trade surplus. China sold $1 trillion more in goods and services last year than it bought, as its exports swamped the globe.
The deficit with China is about $1 trillion. Think of it, $1 trillion. They're using our money to build their military.
Trump also wants China to do more to stop the flow of illegal drugs, including fentanyl, into the US. China has responded with a 15% tariff on US coal and liquefied natural gas, and it's levying 10% tariffs on crude oil, farm equipment and some vehicles. It's also announced export controls on rare metals, such as tungsten and tellurium. In some ways, this latest tit-for-tat merely builds on the long-running trade dispute between the nations. Trump has already imposed, then suspended tariffs against allies Mexico and Canada. But these are US allies, and in the 4 years since the last Trump administration, relations with China have worsened.
Well, first, it is really about the trade surplus that the US is looking at in a rather negative way. So if China is willing to buy more goods from the US, then probably it can solve part of the problem.
In China, consumers are anxious about the impact on an economy already seeing slower growth. But there's also growing defiance.
It's as if you punched me and I punched you back. If it goes on, back and forth like this, there may be serious consequences, with the confrontation escalating. A counter-strike is necessary. We should strike back properly, so that we can sit down for talks on an equal footing.
Trump has said he plans to speak to Xi, although he also insists he's in no hurry. Talks between the two are key to easing or delaying tariffs, as conversations with Mexican and Canadian leaders have shown. Trump says he has great relations with Xi, but this trade duel is shaping up to be a tough fight.
Well, Cliff Conan from DW Business still with us. So, Cliff, China, long a target for US sanctions, as you outlined there. How much room is there for negotiation this time?
I think this is all about China. Everything that he does at the moment is about China. I think with the allies, I think there's going to be room for negotiation and they will find a deal. But against that backdrop, the things with China are extremely complicated because China, he got a deal in his last administration and China didn't really buy the goods that they said they would do. He's examining those terms of that deal now, and I think he's going to push harder on China this time around. At the same time, he's professed he's got this very strong relationship with Xi Jinping. So I think there's room for a deal, but I think it's really aimed at pushing China to spend more money on US goods, particularly to help offset this massive trade surplus that we spoke about in this article.
And so how is China expected to do that? How is China expected to tell its people, buy more American fridges or cars or whatever?
Well, China has a huge savings rate, and a lot of that was going into property. Now the property market is in collapse. There's a difficulty with savings, but it still hasn't managed to free up the money. People are anxious. They're holding on to their cash. The economy is slowing. The Chinese government needs to do more. It needs to make it cheaper to borrow money. It needs to give grants to buy electric cars. It needs to introduce all these kind of stimulus measures that will kind of free up money and allow them to buy more imports. But at the same time, the Chinese government realizes that's potentially destabilizing because it needs the exports to keep the economy growing as it is now. So the Chinese government is in a real quandary, and I think Trump is very keen to exploit that when it comes to negotiations with China.
OK, thanks for talking us through that, Cliff. Clifford Coonan from DW Business.